Chapter 1. Gus stood beside the living room window, waiting for the annual spring rains. They should have come by now, he noted, glancing at the battered Motley Funeral Home calendar hanging from a nail on the wall. It was May 17th, 1940, and Gus's wilted crops made him wonder if, somehow, he had angered Mother Nature. Usually the rains came between March and April, freeing him to hunt or fish the latter part of the spring, while cabbage, collard, and tomato sprouts strengthened in the moistened earth. That year, the stubborn rains prolonged the daily sojourn Gus and the boys took to the river and back. Locals called it the Jordan, carrying 5-gallon buckets of water for both their own and the sprouts' survival. Gus loved the rains. As a child, he lay in bed listening to the thunderous polyrhythms they drummed into the rusted tin rooftop. Something about the melody soothed his somber soul and allowed him to cry without fear of his father's reprisal. After all, he was a boy, Chester Peace Sr. loved to remind him, as though his genitalia didn't. And tears didn't speak well for one who would, one day, become a man. The indelible imprint of Chester Sr.'s inordinately large hand on Gus's tender face whenever he wept never bothered the boy who, in his heart, wanted nothing more desperately than to emulate his father. But as he grew, he never learned to control his tears. He learned instead to hide whenever he felt their approach. The rains awakened something in him. Maybe it was their steady flow that eroded his makeshift stoicism and caused water to gush from his eyes as if from a geyser. Whatever the connection, Gus always wept along with the rains. He'd convinced himself that the sky, like him, was cursed with a heavy heart that required annual purging. So every spring since his 10th birthday, when the scent of moisture filled his nose, he escaped to the Jordan River and stood amid the rain, wailing away pain like a woman in labor. Whether it lasted for hours or even a day, no one expected his return to normalcy until the showers subsided. Gus was grateful others didn't ask why he cried, because he couldn't have explained it. Had he known words like injustice or inequity, he might have been able to translate his feelings into words. But with a third-grade vocabulary, such articulation was out of the question. All he knew was that he cried when things weren't right. He wept as a child when other children mocked his holy shoes, and then he wept when God refused to grant him the courage and the will to fight. He wept for mother birds that couldn't find worms for their young. He wept for cows left freezing in the snow. He wept for Miss Maisie, the woman whose husband slashed her with a butcher's mallet for talking back, and wept even harder when he overheard that they put the man away. Most of all, he wept because he thought people in the world didn't care. His hardest days were between the rains. At the most inopportune moments, in the middle of the summer or the bitter cold of winter, he'd witness a wrong and water would ooze unannounced across his cheeks, and he'd be forced to retreat into some private place where his tears wouldn't be cause for ridicule. Yet these momentary cleansings never resulted in Gus's complete healing. Only the annual spring rains set his heart right again. So, after the 3rd grade, the end of Gus's formal education, he began anticipating the rain's arrival. As soon as the first buds bloomed, he'd watch the heavens for signs of inclement weather. And when the dark clouds gathered, he'd run to the Jordan and welcome the downpour. After 1910, locals noted the beginning of spring when they heard Gus wailing in the distance, and, whether out of fear or simple disinterest, no one bothered traveling to the riverbank to see exactly what Gustavus Peace was doing, much less why. He needed the rains of 1940 worse than he'd ever needed them. For the impending birth of his 7th child, the only one he had never wanted, incited rage he feared he couldn't restrain. Yet the rains wouldn't come. Each morning, he jumped from his sleeping pallet on the floor, sniffing the air like a Labrador retriever, hoping to smell the sweet scent of moisture, only to be disappointed when his nostrils inhaled particles of dry, pungent red dust. Having never mentioned to his wife, Emma Jean, that he felt of strangling her. His greatest fear now was that an overflowing heart would cause him to crumble before his sons. Each day, his eyes glazed over and his hands began to tremble, and he cursed the Rains for seemingly having abandoned him. So far, he had remained composed, but he knew he wouldn't last much longer. When Emma Jean screamed, Gus released the curtain, turned from the window, and looked toward their bedroom. It was really her bedroom, he thought, for he had slept on the floor since learning of her pregnancy. He liked it that way. It kept him from touching her and creating another mouth to feed. He wouldn't have touched her this last time had Emma Jean not convinced him that she couldn't have any more children. Gus asked why, and Emma Jean said that she was going through the change. He didn't know exactly what that meant, but he took her at her word. The day she confessed her pregnancy, Gus nodded and promised in his heart never to touch her again. That would keep the children from coming, he reasoned, and that was exactly what he wanted. Push! Henrietta coaxed with her hands cupped around the wet, slimy crown of the baby's head. Beads of sweat danced across Emma Jean's shiny black forehead as she panted. With borrowed might, she clutched the sheets on which she lay and bellowed, "Ah!" tossing her head from one edge of the pillow to the other. "Oh my God, I thought having a girl," breath, "would be easier than having them big knucklehead boys." Henrietta chuckled. She had delivered almost every child in Conway County, Arkansas since the 1920s, and if nothing else, she had learned that a baby's gender could never be predicted. "This might be another boy, Emma," she warned softly. "Don't get your hopes up too high. Plenty women think they having one thing and have something else. Now, breathe and push again." Emma Jean sighed, refusing to relinquish hope that she was finally birthing the daughter she'd always wanted. That hope lent her strength to push again. "Ah!" she growled, exposing the rich, deep alto for which folks at St. Matthew No. 3 Baptist Church were grateful. It was this voice that had caught Gus's attention years ago, teasing his soul one Easter Sunday morning with a rendition of He Rose that left him tingling inside. He called the feeling love and asked Emma Jean to marry him. That was 15 years ago, back when he was a fool, he always said. "It won't be long now," Henrietta encouraged. "Just a few more pushes and we'll have ourselves another baby." Emma Jean gripped the iron bars of the headpost and stared at the ceiling, delirious. She wanted to push again, but couldn't find the strength. In the meantime, she wondered if Gus had decided upon a name, since he hadn't liked any of her choices. "What about Rose?" she posed one night, leaning over the edge of the bed. Gus grunted something unintelligible and pulled the battered quilt over his head. Emma Jean interpreted the response as a no. "Then what about Violet, or maybe Priscilla?" Too sleepy to care, Gus hoped his words would close the matter. "Them don't sound like no colored girl names to me," he murmured. "And anyway, it probably gonna be a boy, the luck we've been having." Emma Jean scoffed. "Just 'cause a girl be colored don't mean she gotta have no old, tired, country-sounding name." Gus peeked from beneath the quilt. "You got one." "I know," Emma Jean shouted, "but that don't mean my baby gotta have one." "Well, it don't make no difference right now, no way. The baby ain't even here yet. Good night." Emma Jean stopped discussing names with Gus. "Why? She wondered, had she consulted a fool in the first place? What would a man know about choosing a baby's name? "I got the head in my hands," Henrietta said excitedly. "Just give me one more good push. Come on, you can do it." The dance of the sweat beads devolved into a slow waltz around Emma Jean's thick brows as she lay exhausted upon the feather pillow. Her good baby blue sheets, which she had intended to remove from the bed in a few days, would now have to be discarded. Thinking she had at least another week before the baby's arrival, she had prioritized other more immediate chores. But when her water broke while she was preparing Sunday breakfast, she knew those sheets were history. Gus and the boys sat in the small living room and waited. Knowing no other way to pass the time, Gus read passages from the Bible, the few he could read, in hopes that something from the Word might still his rumbling heart. He would love the baby, he resolved, but he would never forgive Emma Jean. Never. And if the rains didn't come, he wouldn't forgive them either. Still in their church clothes, which was a clean shirt beneath their work overalls, the boys anticipated the sister they didn't have. Of course, another brother would be okay, they agreed silently. But a sister would add spice to an otherwise dull household. Mr., the youngest brother, didn't care either way. He simply wanted someone else to be the baby of the family. "What if it's a boy?" Mr. asked. "Shut up, will you?" Authorly insisted. "If it's a boy, then it's a boy, that's all. And if it's a girl, then it's a girl. Just be quiet till we know." Mr. grimaced and stuck out his tongue. He hated his brother's uncensored authority. "Why don't you shut up?" he almost said, but didn't. One day he would say it, he swore, but for now he held his peace. Everyone assumed Authorly the eldest, but James Earl was 14 months his senior. No one had ever heard James Earl speak more than a passive phrase or two a day, so they deemed him far too timid to lead a pack of 6 brothers. Authorly's muscular disposition and loquacious tongue, on the other hand, granted him the position of eldership among the boys, causing the others to wonder at times if he perceived himself their father instead of their brother. Having no resolve to challenge him, the others obeyed Authorly, calling him names behind his back whenever he infuriated them. Even James Earl acquiesced, yielding his obedience as an offering of gratitude for Authorly's willingness to lead. Locals called James Earl slow. Some said retarded. Others said off, and wondered what woman would ever tolerate such a puny, no-count man. "You sure that boy all right?" Miss Mamie Cunningham sneered, watching 6-year-old James Earl stumble down the church steps. "He's perfectly fine," Emma Jean huffed. "He just in his own world." "And he in it by himself, too." "Kiss my ass," Emma Jean wanted to say, then remembered that Miss Mamie was twice her age. Anyway, it was true that James Earl was a bit different, she had to admit. He weighed only 4 pounds at birth, and once Gus scribbled his name and birth date, James Earl Peace, June 13th, 1928, in the huge white family Bible resting on the sofa and table, Henrietta guaranteed he wouldn't survive. But he did. He didn't eat much, but he kept on living. Emma Jean forced her nipple in his mouth every 3 or 4 hours, but most days, James Earl lay in her arms like a corpse, seemingly unable to discern what to do. Usually once a day for 10 minutes or so, he'd suckle and whine like a sick puppy, and Emma Jean would cry as she prepared to wake any day and find him stiff as a board. But he just wouldn't die. He was 3 before he took a step, and 4 before he said a word. At 5, he began eating solid food. So Emma Jean gave thanks for his life and stopped worrying. The day Authorly came, Gus half read a flyer at Morrison's General Store announcing the release of a book some author had written. Mistaking author for the writer's name, and unable to distinguish phonetically between author and Arthur. Gus exited the store, proud he could spell the first half of a name he liked. Walking home, he discovered he couldn't spell the other half. He knew it started with an L. He had learned his consonant sounds well, but L-E didn't look right in his mind. Trying to recall other names with the E sound, he said several aloud until he stumbled upon the final sound in his mother's name. Lucy, he mumbled. The Y must be the E sound, he decided, sticking out his chest as he visualized the entirety of his second son's name. Afraid he might forget some of the letters, he scratched the name on the sheet-rocked wall of the Peace living room the moment he arrived. When Henrietta announced that Emma Jean had had another boy, this one damn near 10 pounds, Gus said his name would be Authorly. He pointed to the childlike letters on the wall as he copied the name, one letter at a time, into the family Bible. Authorly Peace, August 23rd, 1929. Henrietta smiled. Not having the heart to correct his spelling, she simply nodded as Gus's pride multiplied. Whenever Authorly felt the need, he referred his brothers to the inscription on the wall as evidence that his coming was obviously divine, since none of their names was thus inscribed. This'll all be over in a minute, Emma Jean, if you can give me one more good push. Emma Jean panted. Just relax and try to control your breathing. We're almost there now. She nodded. Take a few deep breaths like this. Henrietta inhaled and exhaled slowly. And give me what you got. A weary Emma Jean gasped. She had given birth before, but she didn't remember it being so exhausting. Maybe after birthing 6 boys, she wasn't the woman she used to be. This one's got a head full of hair, girl. I feel it, Henrietta said, winking at Emma Jean while tugging the baby from her womb. This might just be the little girl you've been waiting for. Emma Jean was hopeful, but refused to celebrate until she knew for sure. She hadn't even chosen a name yet, although recently she'd considered Octavia, or maybe Scarlet. If it was a boy, she didn't know what she'd do, and she definitely didn't know what she'd call him. Gus returned the oversized family Bible to the sofa end table. He'd give those damn Rains a piece of his mind whenever they finally came, he thought. It wasn't fair, making him carry an overflowing heart for months now. And if, at any moment, he collapsed and unleashed in front of his boys, those Rains would have to pay. Woody, the third boy, slithered out like a slimy black garden snake, Henrietta said. She had never delivered a baby 25 inches long, so she told Gus to beware the devil in him. Gus said he would, then scribbled, Woody Peace, July 2nd, 1931, into the biblical registry. The child grew so quickly, some folks said they saw him grow before their very eyes. Who had ever seen a 5-year-old stand 3 feet tall? And as if that wasn't strange enough, he laughed incessantly as he grew. Gus tried beating him, in hopes of calming his unbridled mirth, but the spankings only made him laugh harder. Perplexed that the jeering seemed unstoppable, and obviously unable to drive the devil from him, Gus stopped whipping Woody and started laughing with him. By 1945, an inch shy of his 6'2" father, 14-year-old Woody was charging people a dime an hour to listen to his outrageous tales. Most paid without complaint. It was Emma Jean's idea. Don't let folks use you, boy. Make these niggas pay if you gonna entertain them. Colored folks always want something for free. Woody obeyed and cut a slit in the plastic top of an empty Folgers coffee can, which then became his personal coffer. Some Saturday evenings he filled the can, at which point Authorly's huge rounded palm collected the remaining admissions. The laugh-ins, as Gus called the gatherings, occurred on the front porch with folks scattered across the yard. Some walked for miles to hear Woody talk shit about things he couldn't possibly have known. Thin as a young sapling in winter, he had elongated arms that swung freely from his torso as he clowned, while his pencil-shaped legs wobbled beneath him. His erratic movements made others fear he'd fall over, but he never did. That was part of the fun, people said. Watching this rail-thin Goliath dramatize stories and jokes as his arms flared wide and his 14-inch feet danced awkwardly upon the wooden porch. Gus couldn't tell whether people laughed with Woody or at him, but after weeks of all those dimes, he stopped caring. The countryman went to a fancy party one night, Woody began one sultry summer evening. At first, folks milled about the yard casually, but when Woody started, they shuffled toward the porch as though it were magnetized. His booming voice, echoing across the yard, complemented his dramatic presentation and caused others to laugh long before he reached the punchline. He was dressed in his best red suit, with red shoes and a matching red hat. The nigger was sharp. Emma Jean yelped. Whenever Woody performed, she screamed like one being stabbed to death. They had food everywhere, of all different types. Ribs, chicken, casserole, all kinds of salads, and the man was eating like he ain't never ate before. Well, like I said, this was a fancy party, so the white folks had labels on each table to let folks know what they was eating. The man walked round to all the different tables, trying a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Then he approached a table with a label he couldn't pronounce. He stared at the little piece of paper a long time, trying his best to figure out what it spelled, but he hadn't never seen the word before. He wanted to try the food on the table, but since he couldn't pronounce the word on the label, he just stood there staring. The white chef behind the table said, "May I help you, sir?" Woody laughed as he mocked the chef's voice. A few men turned away and hollered. The Negro countryman didn't want to look stupid, so he threw his head back real grand. Woody exaggerated the movement and started talking like the educated white chef. Yes, sir," he said. "I'd like to try some of your hors d'oeuvres, please." People shouted and scattered as if a bomb had exploded. Even Gus covered his bad teeth and laughed freely. Others tried to retell the story later, but no one could perform it like skinny Woody Peace. Emma Jean hoped the boy would become famous one day. Maybe then she wouldn't have to work anymore. Gus and Emma Jean agreed their fourth child had to be a girl, so they never bothered thinking of another male name. Disgusted and disappointed when another boy arrived, this one the blackest of all, Gus suggested they call him King Solomon, since, according to Reverend Lindsay, King Solomon had been a wise man. Emma Jean liked the idea, so Gus scribbled, "King Solomon Peace, May 20th, 1933, into the family Bible. No one paid Saul, as the boys called him, much attention until Christmas of 1939. Dressed in James Earl's old Easter suit, he rose, prepared to recite Silent Night as his Christmas speech, but suddenly decided to sing it instead. His rich vibrato mesmerized the audience initially, but when Saul belted "All is calm, all is bright," complete with runs and trills adult vocalists couldn't manage, people ignored his age and let the Holy Ghost have its way. Miss Mamie cried, "Yes, Lord," as others stared in awe and wonder. The real phenomenon, Gus noted, was that the boy's voice was identical to his mother's. Gus felt the same tingling sensation whenever Emma Jean sang, and, to keep from crying, he rocked violently in every direction with authorly whispering, "Shh," into his right ear. No one could believe it. Saul switched to falsetto and ended sweetly with "Sleep in Heavenly Peace." a momentary hush befell the hypnotized congregation. Miss Mamie broke the silence with, "Ooh-wee, that boy's got a gift." "Sure enough," others confirmed. Saul didn't comprehend exactly what he'd done, but he loved the crowd's response to it. So he started singing to anything and anyone who would listen. His voice became the clarion call for others to rise each morning in the Peace household. So if he overslept, everyone did. He loved that his voice disturbed people, leaving them weepy and vulnerable. He loved that birds gathered and chirped along as he serenaded the universe. And he loved that, in the spring of 1940, Gus asked him to sing to the seedlings, and maybe they'd grow. People laughed at the boy, moving from row to row like a ministering evangelist, grazing his tender fingertips across fragile sprouts and singing at the top of his tenor range. But when, weeks later, peas, corn, okra, snap beans, and cabbage jumped from the earth in green abundance, the naysayers fell silent. Gus was grateful, but warned Saul not to get a big head. On Saul's first day of school, Miss Irma Briers was taken with his brilliance. He was precisely what a burnt-out country school teacher needed. Yet Gus saw things differently. He asked Emma Jean, "If the boy already smart, what's the point of sending him to school?" She ignored him and smiled at the A's plastered across Saul's worksheets. He tutored his older brothers in reading and math, and loved that Authorly submitted to him, if only for a while. "How you get smart like that?" Gus asked Saul one night before bed. "Me and your mama ain't smart." He shrugged. "I don't know." Gus shrugged too. And Saul honestly didn't know. Things came easily to him, he said, and quickly. Sometimes he'd stare at other pupils, wondering why the simplest concepts appeared so difficult for them. But he never belittled anyone. Gus had told him that if you don't use a gift to help others, God will take it away from you. So Saul assisted his classmates, whenever Miss Irma allowed, until most comprehended what he had understood days earlier. Little King Solomon Peace was the joy of the classroom, until the day Emma Jean insisted he stop going. Gus and Emma Jean's fifth child was born blind. Kicking in the womb as though frustrated with its confinement, the baby reminded Emma Jean every day that she would surely regret having conceived out of desperation. In her 6th month, she knew it was a boy because, as she told her sister Gracie, only a man would kick a woman this hard. Miss Mamie confirmed her fear. "High as you carrying that load, girl, can't be nothing but a old big-head boy." 13 minutes after her first contraction, her 5th son burst forth without uttering a sound. Emma Jean screamed. "He all right," Henrietta said. "Just quiet, I guess, that's all." Having run out of boy names 2 boys ago, Emma Jean simply called him Baby and said that somewhere, somehow, his name would surface. Gus thanked God the child was alive and felt relieved that at least the boy didn't seem slow. Baby was even punier than James Earl had been. At 6 weeks, he weighed 7 pounds and always seemed to be staring into oblivion. Emma Jean fed him and told God that if he were going to take him, then go ahead and do it. When God didn't, she asked Henrietta to take another look at the child. "He all right," Henrietta reassured after further examination. "Just little, and blind as a bat." Emma Jean sighed, then remembered that Reverend Lindsay had preached about a blind man who, despite others' objections, cried out to Jesus on the Jericho Road until Jesus restored his sight. Hoping for a similar miracle, Emma Jean prayed and named her son Blind Bartimaeus. She dictated each letter slowly, repeatedly, until Gus had it engraved in the family Bible. Blind Bartimaeus Peace, July 31st, 1934. Of all the boys, Bartimaeus was most like his father, and Gus hated it. He had prayed that his sons wouldn't inherit his oversized heart. That's how he thought of his emotional fragility. But as Bartimaeus cried throughout his formative years for reasons no one could discern, Gus knew his prayer had gone unanswered. What the boy couldn't see, he felt even more intensely, and only when Gus held him did he calm and drift to sleep. Grateful the child couldn't see him, Gus often walked the dirt roads of Swamp Creek with Bartimaeus cradled in his arms, smearing tears into both his own and the child's high cheekbones. Only then did Gus ever see the boy smile and cackle like a normal baby. When the rains of 37 came, he wasn't surprised that Bartimaeus's 2-week crying spell ended abruptly. He simply knew he'd have to teach the boy to hold his heart until he found a safe, obscure purging place. As Bartimaeus grew, his sensitivity multiplied. The rains of 39 marked his transition from a shy, quiet youngster into a talkative, perceptive one. Gus groomed contempt for this new self, especially once people started calling the boy sweet. "He ain't sweet," Gus insisted. But Bartimaeus was sweet, people declared, and his blindness made him sweeter. Who had ever seen a child feel his way from one person to the next, hugging everyone as though trying to feel the beat of people's hearts? And who had ever seen a boy raise his arms in frozen ecstasy as floral fragrances wafted by his nose? Yes, he was the sweetest boy in Swamp Creek. Probably in the whole state of Arkansas, Miss Mamie declared. Sweet, blind Bartimaeus. Nothing Gus said could redeem the boy's public reputation. Gus thought to beat him, like Chester Sr. had done him. Surely that would allay the boy's sensitivities and quiet people's tongues. The only problem was that whenever he raised his hand to strike Bartimaeus, the child sensed the impending violence and recoiled in utter fear. All Gus could do was cry and hold him. Never attending school, how in the world, Gus argued, could a child learn to read if he couldn't see? Bartimaeus let his imagination become his reality. In his mind's eye, he saw the world as a place of perfect love, where people exchange hearts simply to know what others feel like. Uninhibited by frowns and stares, Bartimaeus touched everything within reach as he attempted to see what those with eyes often overlooked. He would have given anything to glimpse, if only for a moment, the honeysuckle bush that smelled so sweet, or the mountain range that Mr. said touched the sky. At night, he grazed his hands over his brothers' faces, creating a family portrait only he could see. But how would he ever know the accuracy of his imagining? Maybe there was a reason God had denied him sight, he thought, and each day he hoped to discover that reason. The last child, or so Gus had thought, was also a boy, and Gus thanked a merciful God he'd never have to raise a girl. He'd wanted Bartimaeus to be the last, but Emma Jean's desperate hope for a girl compelled him to relent once again. She'd always foreseen a herd of children, but girls were her preference, so with each birth she prayed the curse of the boys would end. Believing the 6th child was a girl and too sick after the 7th month to endure another day, Emma Jean induced her own labor. Unable to find Henrietta, Gus told her that she'd have to birth the child alone, so she did. When she saw its penis, she looked heavenward and mumbled, "Damn you." Then she screeched, "Gus, come get this." He knew it was another boy. "You name him whatever you like. It don't make no difference." Gus said, "Well, people gonna call him Mr. Something when he get grown, so we might as well start calling him Mr. now." Emma Jean would have hollered had she had the strength. After waking from a nap and hearing the other boys call him Mr., she decided to let the name stand. Gus wrote, Mr. Peace, August 16th, 1935, in the family Bible, and closed it with finality. When I have my little girl, I'll name her something pretty, Imogene promised herself. We almost got the shoulders out, Henrietta said. If you can give me one more good push. Imogene raised herself, almost to a full sit-up position, and roared, "Ah!" Then collapsed heavily. Oh my God, she gasped. This has got to be my little girl. It just got to be. Let's just get it here first, Henrietta cautioned. Then we'll see what it is. She dabbed Imogene's forehead with a cool, moistened cloth. Gus didn't have to worry about this ever again, Imogene thought. Boy or girl, she had had enough of childbearing for the rest of her life. After one last feeble push, Henrietta said, Dear Jesus, here it is. Slowly, she lifted the baby, showing Imogene her seventh son. Imogene closed her eyes and trembled. What had she done to make God mock her so, she wondered. Hadn't she been an obedient daughter, even when her mother beat the shit out of her? Hadn't she fed and clothed her children to the best of her ability? Hadn't she married and loved, well, not loved, but at least respected, a husband whom she was sure no one else had wanted? He's just as cute as he can be, Imogene, Henrietta pacified, after severing the umbilical cord. This one's kind of golden, not as black as the others. Soft, curly hair. Yep, he's a beauty. Imogene wouldn't look. All she could think about was the promise she had made as a child to love and to pamper a daughter the way someone should have loved her. She dreamed of stroking a little girl's hair and binding it with golden ribbons, then sending her off to be admired by the world. But that couldn't happen now. How would she ever spite her mother without a daughter of her own? Don't be disappointed, honey. A healthy child's a blessing, don't care what it is. And this one's the cutest one yet. Plus, a house full of boys is always a blessing. Henrietta sat the newborn in a small basin of lukewarm water and began to rinse the guck from him. Yup, he's the prettiest. Just look at all this hair, girl. Imogene's silence compelled Henrietta to add, And these here boys sure enough gonna take care of you one day. You mark my word, boys take care of their mama. Imogene ignored Henrietta. She certainly loved her boys, especially Arthurly, but she couldn't foresee a future without the daughter she'd imagined. God must think this is funny, she thought. Why does he love to watch people suffer? What kind of God is he anyway? Aren't people supposed to get something they want before they die, especially if they've never had anything? Henrietta wrapped the infant in the pink towel Imogene had bought weeks ago at Morrison's and handed the baby to its silent, stoic mother. Imogene received the bundle like one receiving an eviction notice. She shook her head as tears welled, but she refused to cry. What would have been the point? Why couldn't she ever have what she wanted? After 6 boys, 6, didn't she deserve a girl? I may as well go tell the menfolk now, Henrietta slurred. At least Gus'll be happy. A yellow-breasted chat appeared on a branch outside the bedroom window. Imogene studied its color and smirked. She loved that shade of yellow. She had foreseen it in dresses and matching hair barrettes adorning her little girl, and now she couldn't relinquish the image. Of course, a boy could wear yellow, but most didn't. What father, including Gus, would allow it? And who would call him beautiful? That's why Imogene needed a girl. She needed someone others would deem beautiful. Someone around the house who would care as much as she did about dainty, frivolous things. Imogene? Someone who wanted her and thought she was the greatest mother in the whole wide world. Someone who needed her, like her sisters had needed their mother, May Helen, years ago. Someone who justified why she, Emma Jean, hadn't murdered May Helen back when she had the nerve. Yes, she needed a girl. She had to have one. And if God thought he was going to deny her, Emma Jean resolved, he had another thing coming. Yes, yes, of course. She burst into triumphant laughter. Her dismay lifted like a fog on a cold, cloudy morning. Emma Jean, are you all right? What is it? Emma Jean unveiled the baby, caressing its limbs, hands, and feet. Hi, honey, she whispered. You finally made it, huh? You just as pretty as you can be. Emma Jean, what are you talking about? I prayed for you a long time ago and now you're here. Henrietta's mouth twitched. Emma Jean, you all right? The mother blinked tears of joy. I'm just fine, Henrietta Worthy. Just fine. She stroked the baby's head gently. Well, I'ma go on out and tell the men folks. You ain't gonna tell 'em nothing, Emma Jean said. Nothing but what I tell you. Henrietta turned, confused. Excuse me? You gonna tell 'em that they got a new baby sister. That's what you gonna tell 'em. And she's just as cute as she can be. Emma Jean smiled. What? Henrietta said, approaching the bed. What did you say? Her eyes narrowed to small oval slits. That's right. This is my baby girl. She's just as pretty as she can be. You said so yourself. What you talking about, Emma Jean? This here's my baby girl, Emma Jean repeated. At least now she is. That ain't no girl. I know you wanted one and all, but... And now I got one. Henrietta glanced frantically from Emma Jean to the ceiling to each of the four walls and back to Emma Jean. What? You heard me. I said this is my baby girl, and that's all there is to it. I don't understand what you're saying, Emma Jean Peace. Henrietta stood with arms akimbo. Oh, sure you do. It ain't deep. It must be deep because I ain't getting it. Emma Jean wrapped the child again and cleared her throat. This is my daughter, she stressed, peering into Henrietta's bulged eyes. And don't look at me like I'm crazy. Henrietta blinked repeatedly. You is crazy. You must done lost your mind, Emma Jean. That baby ain't no girl. I know what it is, but it gon' be a girl from now on. Henrietta's mouth fell open. You ain't got nothing to worry about. This all my doing. I just need you to keep your mouth shut, that's all. Keep my mouth shut, Henrietta shouted. Is you plumb crazy, Emma Jean Peace? Shh. Like I said, you ain't got nothing to explain to nobody. Just let my business be my business. You can't be serious. What kind of mother would do this to a child? Emma Jean looked away. Just let me handle this my own way, okay? And anyway, a child gonna believe whatever you tell it. As long as she thinks she's a girl, that's what she'll be. So that's what she is now. Henrietta clasped her mouth in horror. Emma Jean, don't do this. You can't just make a person be what you want him to be. That's sick. She backed away from the bed slowly. You can't make a daughter out of no boy. Sure you can. Just think about it. You don't know what most folks is. Not really. You ain't seen 'em naked, is you? Henrietta paused. Well, is you? No, I ain't, but what? Most folks look like a boy or girl, but you don't know for sure what they is, do you? Come on, Emma Jean. Don't try to justify this mess. I don't care what you say. It ain't right. Maybe it ain't, but it's what we gonna do. We? Henrietta hollered. That's right, me and you. We in this together. I ain't in nothing with you, Emma Jean Peace. You ain't nothing but an old conniving black heifer. Maybe I am, but I'm a damn good one. And like I said, I ain't got to explain nothing to you or nobody else. All you gotta do is be quiet about my business. Henrietta shivered. What's wrong with you, woman? You think ain't nobody got good sense but you? Who can believe this boy is a girl? You may as well admit you had a boy and be done with it. You can't just turn no boy into a girl. I can do whatever the hell I want to, Miss Lady, and you gonna keep your mouth shut about it. Stop this, Emma Jean. Stop it right now. The menfolks wondered why Henrietta was stomping, but they dared not enter the birthing room. I know you've been wanting a girl, but it wasn't God's will. You gotta take what God gives you and try to see the blessing in it. And sometimes you gotta make a blessing out of it. Henrietta shook her head and breathed deeply. You can think whatever you want to, Emma Jean, but I ain't going along with no mess like this. She turned to exit. Oh, sure you will, Emma Jean sassed. Unless you want folks to know about Louise's baby. Like Lot's wife, Henrietta turned and froze. Don't you dare. You don't know nothing about Louise's baby. She ain't got nothing to do with this shit you doing. Henrietta's bottom lip trembled like a gospel soloist's. You're right. That ain't none of my business, and this ain't none of yours. Not really. So just keep your mouth shut, and we'll all be fine. But Emma Jean, I ain't about to tell folks you had no girl. I can't lie like that. Oh, yes, you can. Sure you can. You did it for Louise, didn't you? Well, now you'll have to do it again. Louise's baby died, Emma Jean. Ain't nothing else to know. Ha! Emma Jean mocked. That's what most folk think, ain't it? Henrietta saw the truth in Emma Jean's eyes and knew she couldn't deny it any longer. She studied the crevices in the hardwood floor and said, Don't do this to me, Emma Jean. Please. Do what? Emma Jean squealed joyfully. I ain't doing nothing to you. Nothing at all. Henrietta sat at the foot of the bed, unable to believe that Emma Jean Peace, of all people, knew what no one else in the world was supposed to know. Anytime you go sneaking around thinking you hide, I guarantee you somebody watching. Guarantee. Henrietta sighed. Nothing to do now but set the record straight. It ain't what you think. I don't think about it. And that's what you should do about this. Just don't think about it. Henrietta couldn't yield so easily. I wouldn't never blackmail nobody into doing something so evil. You sure enough got the devil in you, Emma Jean. Well, you must have had him in you too, to take another woman's child. I ain't took nobody's child. It didn't happen like that. Well, however it happened, it happened. That's your business. She lifted the baby to her bosom. And this is mine. Henrietta rose. You gonna answer to God for this. Ain't we all? Who ain't got something to answer to God for? Henrietta said nothing. That's what I thought. Now, let's make sure we're on the same page with our little arrangement. What is this? Emma Jean pointed to the infant. Henrietta looked away. It's whatever you say it is. That's right. And what do I say it is? Henrietta hesitated. A girl. It's a girl. That's right. And she's beautiful. Couldn't be more perfect, could she? Emma Jean's wink drove Henrietta toward the doorway. You'll never get away with this. Get away with what? Loving and celebrating my perfect little girl? Suddenly, Emma Jean shrieked, retarding Henrietta's exit. Oh my God, that's it. That's her name. Perfect. Because that's what she is. Don't you think that's a pretty name? It's your child. Yes, it is, and perfect's her name. Oh, this is wonderful. Emma Jean beamed. Henrietta closed her eyes and said, if it's the last thing I do, I'll get you for this one day. I promise you that. Don't make promises you can't keep, Emma Jean said. Oh, I'll keep it. And when I do, you can go now, Henrietta. Thanks for everything. And on your way out, tell Gus and the boys about the new woman in the family. Chapter 2. When the rooster crowed, Emma Jean.
All right, fellas, and there was probably the most important chapter of the whole book. And I don't know if you saw, I was checking, but it's actually the longest chapter of the whole book, too. All the other chapters are only like 15 minutes long. That's all I was checking. I don't know if you guys saw that, if you could see the page, but this chapter was 50 minutes. But for example, chapter 2 is 17 minutes. Chapter